Because this is a real-time chat video, it is split up into 3 shorter video segments. Part 1 is a show and tell of the most recent face sketches I have been doing in a little sketchbook and showing them as I create other project videos. I answer a few of the questions that have been asked about the face sketches in the comments of prior videos. Parts 2 and 3 are videos where I am flipping through my figurine book art journal and chatting about the pages. What is a figurine book? It's basically the art journal I use to experiment with techniques for art journal pages, cards, and all sorts of projects. When you watch part 2 of this series, you will see why I call it a figurine book. Enjoy! I'm going to go ahead and go into the flip of this figurine book art journal. I got 2 of these quad 4x4 books at the thrift store. Seems to be my art store of choice is the thrift store, but you can find a lot of really usable, interesting things for a really good price if you look. You got to keep looking. But it is called a figurine book. Now this is the first one. I haven't even started on the second one. And what this is for me, I'm sure I have shown pages out of here before, but I don't think I did an entire flip. But what this is for me is, as I'm working on various projects, I do experiments in here. Like here, I was working with an A alphabet, and I was blocking it out 10 by 10 here. So this goes back to, I believe, 2013, and my very first page. Here I was working with an art journal layout, and here I was experimenting with different paints that I was going to use on that art journal, and different words that meant something to me then, and then I was just blocking in a layout and where I wanted various elements to go. Just getting a basic composition of my page, which did not look too much like this at all. This, I copied a poem that I wrote when I was probably in college when I wrote this, probably in the 70s. And this is a poem that meant a lot to me. And for whatever reason I was going to use it in a piece of art, I copied it down here, and I'm glad I did because I have it. Now these red marks that you see here are fade throughs from this, and this is red ink. I believe that this is either speedball calligraphy ink is what I believe it is, and I was experimenting with putting a line of ink in a swirl and then swishing those lines out. Now I was just experimenting with swirls, and I called them swishes and swirls. Here I got 2013. I was also experimenting with stamping. Red Bombay ink and a hair color brush. That's how I made those little lines. From those of you that color your hair know that in that hair color kit that hooks onto your coloring bottle, there's a little brush. And I was using that to make these marks. I have a stamp of a clock here, stamp of the year 2013, some flourishes in here. Just experimenting. More experimenting. See, I wrote on this page, experimenting with stiff brush and acrylic black paint. That's what this was, and I was trying to get longer lines of these swishes. And same thing here, I was just playing with swirls and different designs, rectangles and circles, and just experimenting. That's what my figurine book is for, to throw down some ideas before I actually put them on a page that I'm working on. I don't do that all the time. A lot of the time I just throw it on the page, but sometimes I want to experiment and see what works and what doesn't. This is a very dark page. Here I'd done some embossing on the year 2013 with some, obviously this is paper in the background. I got Paper Twist Cord Trial. I had twisted this into a cord, and of course this is flat, and that this, if you could feel it, is twisted up as a cord. And this is a wide one here. And I even recorded what I did. Cut 1 inch wide strip, 2 fold like bias tape in half again, and then twist to a rope, 1, 2, and 3. I was showing the steps that I got, how I got to here. Got some black ink on this. Well, let's see. There's a page in between here. Well, some of the pages stick together. It's the way it goes. 213. I was obviously experimenting, I think, with a postcard, and I think this was, well, I've written stamping, but I think I was experimenting with doing a postcard in January of 2013. And you see, I'd put a clock and the flourishes and stamping. Here I was experimenting with that, those swishes and swirls again. This goes to February, I think, of 2013. I wanted to put a photo of the final black and white card here. I was working with doing some cards for a swap, and the theme was black and white. I never got the photo with there, but I left the space for it. Here again, I was working with those swishes and swirls, just seeing what I could do, working with the red Bombay ink. Small hair color brush, trying to achieve a feather eyelash look. Here I was playing with a spider web. More spider webs in here. I did a Valentine, and that's in another journal. But I did a Valentine, and if you're on my Facebook page, you may have seen me show that Valentine. But I was playing with drawing a Valentine and putting a spider web. You see little hearts in here, my little black spiders. Of course, I was working with the red Bombay ink, spraying through a doily over here. I collaged a piece here. I'm not sure what I was doing there. Here I was working on the layout for an art journal page. This art journal page actually went to my friend Giselle Grenier. And the theme was, chatter, something like that. And of course I was working out the words yakety yak, talk back, yada yada yada, blah blah blah, chat, chit chat. And I was drawing out all those words, how I thought I might want to put them on the page. And here I was working out an 8 by 10 grid for some reason. This was a note that came in a swap that I was in. Enjoy your goodie bag. I got a goodie bag. This was just a note of tips that I wanted to do on my video. Don't know if I've done them all. A blank page if I ever want to go back. Here I was getting into just drawing different little pink designs with my pink marker. And you can see I got dots and swishes, and not sure what the real purpose was. I was just doodling, I guess. Same thing here. Here I cut a stencil that I called my flying X's. And these are X's that look like they're in flight. And I actually did cut that stencil. I don't use it too much, but here's where I was planning it out. And here I said, think floating diamonds. Here's more of that stencil design that I did. I call this my flying X's stencil. I'm sure here I was just playing with different doodle designs. Here I was, hello, hello, hello. I was designing a card. I was experimenting with stamping with StazOn ink on a transparency. And these are just my trials, and I put them in my figurine book. This is more of that stenciling. I got some modeling paste on here. My scissors, my hello card with scissors. And you can't tell it very well, but on here, each one of these is a scissors that have been stamped on there in a circular design. This scissor stamped different ways. And then the handles form this circular design. So I was just experimenting with different layouts. Sketch working on placement of collar for Coral Nostalgia Journal page. I did a art journal page that the theme was color, and I chose the color coral. My mother's wedding dress was coral, and this is the collar of her wedding dress. It was a coral wedding. It was in the 1940s, and she had a coral colored wedding dress, and it had a collar, and it had all these silvery sequins on it. Playing with handmade stencils. Here was where I was actually, here's one of the stencils that I made. The actual stencil is right here. I just cut it out of a transparency. And here's more of the stencils that I was working with. My flying X's. Different. Not everything was successful, but you know what? These could go back and make some good background pages, couldn't they? If I wanted to. I'm leaving them in my figuring book because they might inspire later on. I like to go back like I'm doing now. And here I was just working with banners and tassels. Scribbling. This is more of my Flying X stencils. Steampunk stamp in the background, a ruler. This was another art journal page that I was working on a quote. How cunningly nature hides every wrinkle of her inconceivable antiquity under roses and violets and morning dew. Ralph Waldo Emerson. I think the theme of that art journal page was antiquity, and I found that quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I did it a couple different ways, playing with some stamping in here. Here, of course, you can see I was spraying acrylic ink through a, actually it looks, I think it was a lawn care edging. I still have it. This is a wire piece. I wanted to see how that acrylic would spray through it. And you know, it did a pretty good job, didn't it? Here's some musical notes that I was sketching. More musical notes. I think I made a stencil of this, too. The entire page was musical notes. I don't use it much. I'm cutting stencils out of really thin transparency. Here I sprayed through it just a trial as I was working with it. This I completely wiped this out with this blue paint. I had a map of Wisconsin here in the background. This was a flourishes in here, but it's all faded into the background. But here again, this would make a nice background with some bright colors over it. So you see, not everything in here is meant to be successful. This is meant to experiment with designing stencils and cards and art journal placement. Here I was spraying through some lace. I don't know what I was doing here. Making a mess, I guess. But boy, could you see pareidolia on these pages, all over the place. Here's that alphabet that I was working on again. I started the A. This is when I did my very first, I have this design too in another art journal. But when I did my very first video on YouTube, this was the concept of the page that I painted while I was talking. It's all different, but you can see I blocked in the colors and I put paint brushes, and here's my dress form that I call Mrs. Wilkins. Welcome to Mary's Atelier. And here, this was what I had written everything down that I was going to say on that video. Well, I started writing it down. Here again, I'm playing with stencils. That's not my design. That's a clock stencil that I had purchased. I think that's a Prima or Plaid. I don't know. This one is mine. These are my Flying X's again. And then sometimes I go to scrapbooking events, and there was a lady here that did these folded stars. Just beautiful. And she gave me the pattern. And here is, we were working on another, I think this was a 4x4 design. And we were working, I think, on elephants. And I did 3s, and these are my patterns of my elephants. I can't remember what the card was all about. It might have even been black and white theme. But here again, I was experimenting.